Alright, now we have our animation done. We're going to go ahead and do some dynamic parenting with the sword to make sure that prop will actually get thrown out of his hand and then attached to something else. So let's see how this is going to work, shall we? We're going to go ahead and have this guy, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and first of all shorten my timeline a little bit. We're going to bring that down to be a little bit more reasonable with our actual animation. I'll say max of 30 frames. That way we can sort of let it play and have it loop pretty reasonably. There we go. So it's a pretty decent animation. It's not my best, but it gets the job done. It gets the idea across, which is important. We're going to go ahead and take a look at, I'm going to go out of pose mode now by hitting Control Tab there. And then I'm going to click the sword, have the sword selected, and go ahead and go to the Constraints tab, which is these little, these chain marks here. Yeah, that icon, that's what you want to press. So, with that, we're going to go ahead and look for a frame that looks like approximately when he would let go of the sword, right? It looks like this might be the last frame he might actually be touching it. So the next frame will be sort of, this should already be in the air, so to speak, right? So right around here, I'm going to go ahead and say, right here, I want to unparent the sword. Now, as of right now, it's parented directly to the hand, the wrist bone, which means that it's not dynamically parented. This is a static parent, which means it cannot be changed dynamically or keyframed in and out of the parent. It's just there. So we want to replace that with a dynamic parenting relationship. What we have to do now is unparent this sword where it stands in world space right here, and then reparent the sword back to the wrist in this position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit Alt-P, and that will say clear parent, but we're not going to click clear parent. We're going to click clear and keep transform. That will keep the transformation of the sword in world space, which means it won't leave where it is right now, which is right in front of his hand. Normally, if you clear parent, it'll go back to its local position, which is usually 0, 0, 0, something like that. So once we have that here, I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe for it by hitting G and then left-clicking without moving my mouse. That's just one way you can do it. Some people like hitting I, but I is way too far for me, so I use G. It's a lot faster. But just don't move your mouse, left-click, and then that will set a keyframe because auto keyframe is on. Then we're going to go ahead and go to the Constraint tab and add an object constraint. So we'll just go to here, and child of is the one that we want to add. Child of is basically a constraint that mimics the whole parenting relationship. The only difference is that there's an actual influence slider, so you can actually turn off a parent. It's very nice. So now that we have this on, we need a target, which of course, if you guys can imagine, is simply the rig, but we want to actually have the, let me go and right click to cancel that real quick to explain this. The child of constraint must first have an object, and then if you want to parent it to a bone, there's a subset of that object. So we're going to go ahead and select the rig first. By eyedropper tooling, the BSS rig is what it's called. So BSS rig V2. And you'll notice that the sword actually disappears. Now, a lot of people when they first use the child of constraint get confused as to why it's doing this and feel like it's useless, but I'll show you exactly how to fix it in just a second. But first, I want to complete this target by giving it the bone that we want to parent it to. So this is going to be wrist, I believe wrist R. And once we get that, last thing we have to do is just simply hit the set inverse button, and that will bring the sword back to its original position and keep the parent relationship. So now we are good to go. Let's go ahead and test it real quick by playing the animation. Yep, it's good to go. It's basically parented exactly the same way that it was before, but now we have this influence slider that we can play around with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to this particular frame where we decided this is the last frame that which he should still be holding onto the sword. And then I'm going to go ahead and mouse over the influence slider, just mouse over it, and then hit I while you're moused over. Now you didn't see it because of this drop down, but as you can see here, it turned yellow. So once this influence bar turns yellow, that means that it is keyframed and can be keyframed later as well. As long as you move it, it'll follow the auto keyframe rules in the fact that once I go to the next frame, I can scroll this all the way down and it'll automatically create a keyframe for me where there is no parenting relationship. So as you can see here, starting from that frame onwards, the sword no longer follows the hand. It's just sort of floating in the air at the last position that we left it in. So what we do from here is we just move it along the direction we want it to go, which is approximately here, right? I'm going to go ahead and twist it a little bit to have it sort of look a little bit better. There we go. And then I'm going to double check. Yeah, it looks like we're going to want it to be a little bit closer to the camera, as you can see here. so it's on the right trajectory to the cake. There we go. And that is, boom. So once we do that, we can actually go ahead and land it in the cake. Land it. And then we can just, boom. So it's now in the cake. And this is great. As of right now, again, the influence is 0, so it's completely unparented to anything right now. So what we want to do is we want to dynamically parent it to the cake now, so that the cake can react and sort of bounce back a little bit and still have the sword attached to it, because now the cake is driving the translation and rotation of the sword. So that's what we want to do. We're going to go ahead and transfer the parent relationship dynamically to the cake now at this frame. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new child of constraint, a new one with a different target. And as you can see here, we still need this one up here. But this new one, child of .001, which we can go ahead and rename this to cake if we want to, right? I'm going to go ahead and eyedropper tool the middle cake, which I believe is probably cake 4, I'm assuming. Yeah, it's going to be cake 4. So I'm going to go ahead and parent it to cake 4. Again, it disappears. Don't worry about that. We're just going to go ahead and hit set inverse. Voila. This time, because it's not a rig, we don't have to add a bone target because there's no bone. So it's just the object itself, which is fine. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and hit I over the while mousing over the influence slider. And then I'm actually going to go back a frame now, because technically speaking, as of right now, it thinks it's parented to the cake already. We want to go ahead and turn that down in the frame before that, so that it's not parented to the cake until it touches it. So that way, any transformation to the cake doesn't affect it until that frame. So we have here, it loses its parent from the hand in this frame, and then it gains a parent to the cake in this frame. So as you can see here, before, I'm going to go ahead and translate this real quick. As you can see here, there's no actual parenting like transformations with this cake moving, but then the moment it attaches to it, there is. So you have this dynamic parenting feature, which is very, very powerful and great for animating props and weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, from here, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little animation with the cake so we can see how this would play out with the momentum here as we did in the original video as well. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to rotate it this way just a little bit, move it up so it kind of doesn't go through the ice. And we have this, and then I'm going to kind of move it just a little bit more, move it back just a little bit more, and then I'm going to have it kind of go down. I'm going to go ahead and copy this keyframe over here of the cake back to where I am now, or forward to where I am now, I should say. And then I'm going to move it back just the y-axis so that it matches the y-axis translation that it just experienced, I should say. So yeah, that should be pretty good. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. So this is our throw animation, and it hits the cake beautifully. The cake could probably stand to be a little bit faster, but I think that's probably just a playback from the viewport. In fact, one little tip I recommend for animation, if you guys want to use this, is to change this no sync option to AV sync or frame dropping. I think they both do the same thing, but AV sync actually syncs to the audio if you have one. As of right now, we don't. But no sync means it's great for the default setting because you can actually see every single frame, so it doesn't allow for any weird rotations or anything to go past you if the frame rate's too low. If you actually want to see the real-time timing of your animations and how fast things feel and stuff like that, the weight, I recommend having frame dropping on. So if you do that, it will actually no longer feel slow. It kind of feels like this is the actual speed that which we're going to be rendering it out at. So it does drop a few frames, as you can see here in the top left-hand corner. It says FPS is 12, but that only means that it's only showing 12 frames per second, but it's still playing in terms of the sequential order of the timeline. It's still going through 24 frames per second, so that it's actually keeping up with the timing of the animation. So there you go. This is our cake animation. This is our dynamic parenting tutorial. I hope you guys learned a lot in that. It's very simple, but hopefully you'll find it very powerful as well and very helpful for your animations in Minecraft.